If I could sum up Jordan I can't say it in one word because he's pretty complex and I'm more complex, I think, in that regard. That's why we were good for each other. I think we pushed each other. I think we made each other better. It was funny on that call we were talking about earlier when he called me and said, he goes, hey, look, after he said a lot of really nice things and over, we talked about these different things and it was very enjoyable. He said, look, I know I was hard to coach. And I said, yeah, but I was hard to be coached by. So we had that in common. That was good for us. We challenged each other. We made each other better. And as much as I could ever give credit to any player and the many young men that played at St. Leo when I was here and other places I'd been, Jordan was willing to play whatever role he was capable of at the time, but always had the aspiration to expand that role. And he picked a place that fit for him. He picked a place that was maybe a stretch initially for him in terms of ability, but he ended up starting every game but probably two in the time that he played here. But his role wasn't the same in his first game as it was the last game. And to his credit, his role was much different in his final game here at St. Leo than it ever was in the beginning because he was willing to work. He was willing to take the challenge. He was willing to be coached. He wanted to be coached. He wanted to get better. And most importantly, he put the time. So he went from being a back-to-the-basket, undersized, low-post player to a guy that stretched the floor, could shoot the threes, could handle the ball, could pass the ball, and had this great innate ability to play the game. And when he added these additional tools to his game, these other skills that he had, he really became a very tough guy to defend and a very fun guy to coach. I think as much for Jordan or probably any of us, our greatest strengths are sometimes our greatest weaknesses. He is as hard-headed, driven, a stubborn human being as I've ever met. And indirectly I've met myself, so I know he's a close second. And I think that's what made him great. He was really willing to embrace and work at the things that he wanted to do, but he had really a dogged determination to get better. And it wasn't a matter of saying to him, Jordan, you can't do that. It wasn't a matter of telling him what he couldn't do to try to get him to do something he could do. He knew what he wanted. He was willing to work for it and aspired for more than what he currently had and was willing to put the time and the effort in and take the critique and the criticism and the coaching. And two people I really felt that made probably more of an impact on him than I did in terms of the coaching. I provided him the opportunity. I put him in the game. But Fred Lewis, who's an assistant coach with us, who played at USF and at Tampa, but for 16 years as a pro around the world, had great credibility with Jordan and had an unbelievable knowledge that he shared with him, and Jordan really soaked that up and it showed in his game and helped him. And the other was Stuart Hart, who was our strength and conditioning coach, who he was willing to work with anybody who came along, but especially those that really wanted to get better, and he and Jordan really hit it off that summer, and it was sort of this mad scientist sort of thing down in the weight room. They were down there regularly working, and he was willing to work. He was the pupil, he was the student, and at the end he really came out a stronger, more fit and determined player. And the combination of what Stuart did with him and what Fred did with him on the court really made him a tough player to defend. Well, there's many moments that I would think of, but I'd have to circle back and say probably the most touching that I remember is the most recent conversation that we had. And I visited him in the hospital when he had a serious injury recently. We got to talk and reflect a lot, and that was very rewarding and very fulfilling for me. But that night that he called me, and I knew he was getting in the Hall of Fame, but it wasn't my role to say he was going to get in the Hall of Fame. You know when I knew he was going to get in the Hall of Fame? About halfway through his junior year. I would look at the statistics and say, this guy's going to be in it. But when it actually happened, and he actually called and said, hey, would you present me? And I'm so excited to hear that joy in his voice, and that sense of accomplishment was very rewarding as a coach and fulfilling to think back in those gyms that I used to drive to see him play games when he didn't know who I was and he didn't know who I was, that ultimately on that day when it was so special that he would call me and ask me to do it. So I'm really genuinely honored to be at St. Leo, and much less to be associated with people like Jordan and the many other teammates that he had that give him this opportunity to be in the Hall today.